Okay, welcome back to another session of Allynwood modelling in the how-to series. What we're going to look at today is installing a couple of the electro-frog points, electro-frogs because they're not insulated here, the rail is live. We're also going to install the cobalt IP digital motors to go with those. We've already converted our points to DCC. We've laid our track bed down where the points are going to go. So the first thing we need to do is mark out where our points go. So our points are going to sit in here at the end of that track. Okay, electro-frog points. These points have already been converted for DCC. If I zoom in and show you what we've done. Okay. So across this point here, you might be able to see just a small gap in the rails there. There used to be two little wires that go across there. So we've removed those and we've soldered, you can see it in there, a small wire between the two rails there. Idea being that the stock rails, i.e. the ones that don't move, these ones here, will carry the electrical charge. This wire then brings it across to these rails, so these and the switch rails maintain the same polarity as the stock rails on either side. So in this case, this one will be positive, this one will be positive, this one will be negative, and that one will be negative. We've had to remove those wires there to isolate the electro-frog. This blue wire you can see coming away from the frog there actually changes polarity in conjunction with the pump. So that frog wire goes into the S1 frog. Okay, what else have we done? At this stage I've left the switch spring in there. You can take it out. I found that with the cobalt digital IP it's actually strong enough to switch that switch and you'll get a good movement. To remove this swing that makes those points nice and clicky is this little plate here you lift up. It's a little metal spring under there, you can remove that and it just helps with installing the points and it makes them a nice gradual movement rather than a click. Plus as a bonus, having a click, at least you know the points have moved across and they're intact. But if you move it gradually you don't get the click. So the click is a little bit of an off thing, but the whir of the motor it's not too bad. So I'm going to remove those springs now and then I'll come back and show you the difference. So before we remove the spring, it's click, click. Okay, so what we're just going to do now is just removing the spring that's underneath this plate to stop it going click, click, okay? So you just need to get something nice and sharp. Some of them have fold down tabs here and here, and what you have to do then is fold them up. But I've noticed lately that the latest ones don't. They just sit in like that. And you can just see this little metal spring. So that's our little spring out. As you can see, it's no longer clicky and it wants to sit central. So you can only do that, or you would only do that if you're going to have a point motor strong enough to hold that. Okay, so now all we're going to do is glue this little cover. Just glue this little cover back onto there. Okay, so we'll do that. You don't want to use a lot of glue because you don't want to glue up your switch mode. A little bit on that bar. Now comes the tricky part. Lining him back on. Aha. There we are. So we just pop him back in. Make sure he's nice and solid. Firm in there. Make sure that you haven't glued up your bar by any mistake. Your tie bars, your throw bar. That's it. Now we'll go back, mark your mount, and we'll go in. Okay, so just to recap, we've taken the wire out, or broken the wire between there and there, over that gap. So we've broken that wire, or we've removed it to isolate the frog section, and then we soldered a wire in between the two stock rails to carry the polarity from the stock to the switch blades. Okay, so even if these don't make solid contact because there's dirt or anything else, then they're still going to be carrying electrical charge by those two wires. We've removed the swing from there, and from the frog we soldered a wire, blue wire, so I know it's the frog wire, onto that little metal there. When we hook that up to our switch motor, then frog. So that will change the polarity of this section in here on the frog via the cobalt IP digital. So the motor needs 3 wires. This is all ready to go. Just to remember, because this changes polarity, you need your isolating joiners on there. Otherwise you're going to get a short. So before we start work, we're just going to clear our work area. So I'm just going to remove these locos and train out. So what do we need to install points in a point motor? Obviously you need a point motor, that's a given. You need a marker so you can mark where to drill the holes for the throw bar and where the track goes, where your frog wire goes. You need the mounting kit, an accessory kit for your cobalt digital IP motor. You need a large bore drill bit to drill a hole to allow that armature on there to move. You need a smaller drill bit just for the holes on the cobalt motor so you can screw it in and mount it. And of course you need a drill. You need glue, because once we drill our holes and clean them up again, then we will actually glue these points in place before we fix the point motor. Okay, let's get on with it. Okay, one thing to keep in mind is whereabouts is your power for the switch going to come from. They say in all the literature that you feed power to your switch or your points from this end here. You can't feed it from that end because that's neutral, so the power's got to come from this end initially. You need to get power to these stock rails. So some people will bring a wire up and they'll solder it in here. Some people like me prefer to bring it via the use of 2 fish plates. And these fish plates here, just a wire soldered to the fish plate. Alright. If I don't put any power on this end, then this rail here is not going to get any power at all. So as soon as your loco comes to this point, it's going to stall. Because this point here has the insulated joiners in it, so there's no conduction of electricity to this rail. That's why I'm going to put 2 powered dropper wires in here. Okay. This rail will get power because it's continuous back to the rest of the system. I need to put power to that, so I'm just going to put power to both. Okay, so first things first is we're going to dry fit our points. So I'm going to dry fit them on the end here. Make sure they're a snug fit, make sure that it's all on the right angle that we want it to be on. Everything looks tickety-boo. And then we grab your marker. And what we're going to do, let's just bring that out there and out there. It's got to mark the ends of the throw bar. We're going to mark the ends of the throw bar up here as well. Let's bring it that way a little bit. Okay. So, I'm going to mark the ends of the throw bar there. Then what we're going to do with that central, I'm going to pop a dot back here. If I was fine enough, then I could put, I'm just going to put a little bit of brass around that, mark around that, just so you hold that. So what we want to do is where these two lines intersect, that's where we want to drill. Okay, everything's looking good on this side, nice and snug. It's the same thing. I'll draw 2 lines. And if you notice, I'm doing with these with the points neutral. And not over one side, not over the other, but neutral. Okay. Also, going to put a point mark just where that frog wire comes off. It's actually a groove under there, and it's always easier to bring your wire down and drill a hole. You don't want to just then try to get the hole lined up and then point wide and everything else. If you want, you can mark the edges of your track, just so when you're trying to put things up, line where your points are going to go. In the end, so then, okay, right. So you can see where our markings are. Now I'm going to remove that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold. That's where I'm going to drill. Okay, so it's the intersection of that line and that line. Up here it's the same. This is our throw bar line there. That's our centre of track, and that's where it's going to go. That's where we're going to drill. Okay. Now, what I haven't marked up, and it's not really an issue anyway because you can just do this by eye, is where those dropper wires are going to feed through. But I might as well put a marking. If I'm going to drill holes, I might as well drill holes. Now when you're drilling holes through foam, through your baseboards, always have a look underneath the baseboard. Just make sure that you're not going to be drilling into any live power, studs, frames, and that where you're going to make your point motors is actually free to do so underneath. So I'm pretty happy. So I'm going to drill a pilot hole. Okay, I'm going to drill the 2 holes for my dropper wires. And on here, that's where my frog's going to go. So let's see if we can get him under there. And my other frog wires here. Okay. So that's our pilot holes done. Now if you wanted to, you can bring your motor wire up from underneath just to check that that's all good. You can just see it poking out there. So that's nicely in the centre. So if I wanted to, I could drive fit the switches again, just check that that's nice and central. I'm not going to do that. So now what we need to do is we need to drill a bigger hole so this actuator arm will actually move from side to side as the point moves. So we only need to drill a bigger hole where the actual point motor arm is going to come through. I will do that as soon as I find out where I put my bigger drill bit. How big does the hole have to be? Oh, here you are. The hole size is dependent on the thickness of your baseboard. The thicker the baseboard, just 1 minute. The thicker the baseboard, the more distance there is between the top of the motor and where the switch is going to sit. So this, when it moves, will move further. So you're going to need a bigger slot. This way, how much does it need to be? As little as you can get away with. If you're really, really good, you make a little fine step between there and it's good. Makes things a little fiddly. What I'm using here is a 5/16 drill bit. So normally, roughly about 10 mil. And I find that actually works quite well. So now as I drill my pilot hole, that will help guide this through. Not much pressure till you're through the foam, it doesn't take a lot. And you'll find that that foam is a little choked up, but the hole is in there. Easy, isn't it? So you can see we're still central. And if I wanted to fit that over the top, I'm bang on, so that's good. One single hole by itself is not good enough, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the drill in and then I'm going to move it backwards and forwards to create a slot. I want to do this in line with that throw bar line that I did before, okay? I'm going to do the same for this one. Why, I hear you ask? That creates, that action there that I've done with the drill mimics the action of this here, pivoting. This pivots that way, or if I want. This pivots forwards and backwards like a pendulum. Creating that slot makes it much easier and you've got a better chance of making your point first time. The more you mess around with your point motor, the more holes you have to drill for screws. When you're going into MDF, it makes it really, really hard. Okay, so we'll just clean that up with a vacuum cleaner. It's quite noisy, so I'll come back once I've done that. So we've cleaned it up. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinstall my points. I'm going to check that the throw bar movement, I've got clearance on that drill bit. So just make sure everything is tickety-boo before we start gluing things down. Just prove a little fiddly, as it always is. Okay, so we line ourselves up again there with where we want things to be. Just check, I've got clearance that way, I've got clearance that way, I've got clearance that way, I've got clearance that way. So I should have enough room. What I'm doing, so I'm checking that I can see by looking down through that hole, I'm checking that I can see that I've got clearance on either side there. Okay, so this is a close-up. This is just within dry field, remember. So what I'm doing, so I'm looking down through there to see that I've got clearance. So that way I can see air, that way I can see through. So I know that when I make my motor, as long as I get it in the middle, I'm not going to have to remount it. Okay. So our next step now is to go ahead, fix these in, glue them down, and then let the glue dry. Okay? Let's do that. So, Supertech glue works really well. Glue and track down. You don't want to put any glue around where that tie bar is, but by all means you can put some up there, some up on this side. A little bit on the other side of that tie bar, throw bar I should say. Why am I calling it a tie bar? I don't know, because I'm having tie fatigue maybe? Alright. So we're just going to spread that out a little bit. You don't need a lot of glue. Just a thin film. If you put a lot of glue then it'll come up and then when you ballast you won't have problems. Again, just be wary around where that throw bar goes, and as necessary. You can always use your finger. Pop that up there. Okay. Now get your wires organised. Make sure everything is joined together happily. And the critical thing about gluing track, make sure that your fish plates are on properly. Because if they're not, you end up with a lump, and then you'll end up with derailments, neither of which is a happy outcome. Double check before you let it dry that you've still got your clearance on your arms. It's very hard to drill out from underneath. Pop your frog wires down the holes that we drilled earlier on. Pop that one down through there. And to drop the wires. The thing with the super tack is you've got a reasonable amount of working time, but then it dries quite quickly. Again, make sure that you've got your dropper wires around the right way. So your red is on the same side, or your positive is on the same side as all your other positives. Which it is. Okay. Let's reach in from underneath. I'll stooky them down. Just like that. Same with the frog wire. Down you go, little fella. Don't put too much tension on your frog wires. The simple fact is they're rather fragile and can snap. Once we ballast the side of the tracks, you ain't going to see that. Okay. Just make sure that everything is tickety-boo before you leave it. Okay, you're going to need a little bit of pressure just to make sure that everything's good. Double check your fish plates. You can't check them too often. Okay, what I do now, piece of baking paper, stops any glue that might be around the place. Then I put over the top of that a flat board. And then on top of that flat board, put a brick. Now I'm going to leave that for a couple of hours, and I'm going to come back and have a look. Okay, so I'm going to put my tools away, I'm going to come back in a couple of hours, and then we'll fit the actual motor. Okay.